Right, we'll get started now. Thank you guys again so much for your attendance this evening. I am Miss Taylor, Assistant Principal of the elementary for grades K2. And I will be introducing our speaker today, which is Miss Yolanda Brown-Spidell. Miss Yolanda Brown-Spidell is a mom, parent advocate, educator, and an executive director of Eaglets Educational Consulting Firm, LLC. She has served in both teacher and administrative roles in Detroit and Metro Detroit for the past 20 years, with 10 of those years in alternative education. She completed her undergrad studies at Eastern Michigan University in psychology and holds a master's degree from National University in Human Behavior. She is a certified K-12 administrator, a certified trauma and resilience trainer, and a Michigan ACE Community Champion presenter. Her passion is classroom management, and she specializes in facilitating professional developments in the areas of SEL and the whole child, ACEs, trauma-informed resilience-focused schools, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Ms. Spidell, we're ready for you.
Everyone, good evening. Again, I am so excited to be back with CPA. The elementary team is running it tonight. So to the principals, the deans, the vice principals, my friend, Mr. Williams, I say thank you so much for this invitation. To the parents, this is round number 3. You know, you guys are hanging on in there with me. We got 3 down and then we're gonna have 1 more to go. And I know that there's gonna be an amazing drawing for a book for us hanging out and spending this time together. So parents, again, I'm gonna jump right in and share our screen because I share it with the panel that I have quite a bit of information to share with us on tonight. So tonight we are going to talk, this is our 3rd session, and we're gonna talk about trauma in our children. Let me put this disclaimer out now. We're not going to talk about trauma from that very dark place, you know, because we're going to talk about how do we define trauma. So parents, I don't want you to think that we're going to go into really dark places. This session is, if your children are sitting with you or around you, it is safe for them to be in this space with us on tonight, because we're going to talk about trauma in more of a cultural broad context. Okay, so again, we want to make sure that you have something handy to write with, to kind of take some notes down. And as always, our working agreement, we are respectful in our space, we are responsible in our space, and we are safe in our space. And I laugh because every time I do this, parents, although I cannot see you, I still look forward to hearing from you. So the team knows that if you have a question that comes up for you in real time in the chat, please don't wait to the end of the webinar. I have asked CPA's team if they would be kind enough to interrupt me in the middle of whatever it is that I'm saying, because as questions come up, I'd like for you to do it in real time. So please, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. All right, you all know I always start with here's what I know to be true. Again, I'm glad that you are taking time out of your life and out of your schedule to be here again. Thank you for being invested in helping your child and your family. Thank you for continuing to stay open to learn and be curious about your child and their school environment. During COVID, you know, as we're coming out of it, again, you all know that I've shared this before, I'll repeat it again. Grace is my word of the day, every day. This is a safe space. The only question that won't get answered is the question that you don't ask. So there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Your voices are valuable, and we honor the fact that you are the expert about your child. I also believe that people just don't know what they don't know. So if you just don't know what you don't know. So sometimes we just don't know what to ask. I would like for you to continue to be kind to yourself and honor your thoughts and your feelings. And I know that we will be better people because we have spent time together. So having said that, let's continue on our journey. I connected tonight the words trauma and PTSD. I did some research and I've done some reading, and we all have this idea of what is trauma. And the thing that I want to say on this slide about trauma that I want everyone to take away this evening, trauma is individual. There are some of us where an event can happen to us and we don't perceive it as traumatic. And then there are some people where an event can happen and they perceive it as traumatic. So if you have been watching the news, we all recognize that our country right now is currently in the George Floyd conversation. We had another young man, Mr. Wright, that was killed in Minneapolis. We're in the Derek Chauvin murder trial, all of these things. So let me share with you what happened to me this week. I was in a meeting with a group of colleagues who do some mental health work. And one of my colleagues brought up that she could not watch the trial because it was too traumatic for her to see that over and over again. And what I shared with them was I have saturated myself in the trial because I love history and I'm a sociologist, right? So I love looking at this and as an educator, but I could only watch the video of the body cam of the police officers one time. Now I made it through one complete from beginning to end, but I could not watch that over and over and over again. So I had to turn my television. So I shared that to say how individualized and how broad the spectrum of trauma can be. Some people couldn't watch it at all. Some people could only watch a little bit of it, and some people can watch all of it. Likewise, in life, some people can handle a little bit, some people can handle a few things, and some people can handle a whole lot. And so it becomes incumbent upon us when we talk about trauma with children to remember they are children. And I often say to people, please let us not expect children to be able to handle things that as adults are a challenge for us. Okay. All right. So there's a few things that I want to highlight out of this video. Out of this slide. And I gave the slide to CPA. So parents, if there are some things that you specifically want to drill down on, I know that you can contact the school to be able to get those things specifically. But I don't want to, I'm putting this slide up for you to read it as I'm talking. But there are some pieces that I wanted to highlight about the actual definition of trauma according to the American Psychological Association. Trauma is anything that threatens injury, death, or the physical integrity of a person. It causes horror, it causes terror, it causes a feeling of helplessness. Okay. And because we're talking about trauma in our children, more than 2/3 of our children report having experienced some type of traumatic event by the age of 16. I also want to mention that there are different types of trauma. There is the actual experience of trauma. And then for those of us that are parents that had something that happened to our children, or educators or social workers, we can experience what's called secondary trauma or vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue. All of that is the umbrella of what we may internalize when we are working with our children who have experienced some type of trauma. So parents, it is noteworthy for us to acknowledge that sometimes when we're dealing with trauma with our children, that we can also begin to internalize a lot of the experiences and the questions that are happening around. So let me give you guys another example. My 16-year-old son is a new driver as of December. And one of the things that I had to acknowledge as secondary trauma is every time my son goes out, I have anxiety because in this current climate, I'm a little nervous, right? And so I have to be mindful of the reality of what am I thinking? How am I processing this? And then when he shares with me, Mom, there are certain spaces I don't want to drive in. There are certain times I don't want to be out on the road. I have to deal with all of that. even that can be in its own way a type of secondary or vicarious trauma. Okay. Statistics show us that it is more common than not for children and adolescents to be exposed to a single traumatic event. Children can develop PTSD. Children can have post-traumatic stress disorder after a traumatic experience. And I listed here some of the behaviors, because we've talked the last time we were together, we talked about belief, behavior being communication. And these are the ways in which our children are signaling to us that something is up with them. They can be very angry or aggressive or have anxiety. We talked about anxiety and depression the last time we were together. They can have difficulty trusting people or fear or isolating themselves. They can start having poor self-esteem or participating in self-destructive behaviors, right? That shift in the loss of interest in normal activities or problem sleeping or changes in how they're eating. They're either under eating or overeating. These all are signs that something is going on with our child. And I know as a single mom with 5 kids, sometimes we'll miss it because life is happening and we have so much going on. But I want to encourage us to kind of tune into what's happening with our babies, because behavior is communicating something. All right. And tonight we're going to kind of talk about that somatic complaints, like when your child is constantly having headaches or stomach aches or something physically is going on. Sometimes that's their way of trying to communicate something is going on with me. Okay. Trauma disrupts and interrupts life. Let me say that one more time. Trauma disrupts and interrupts life. So in the psychology world, and I believe most educators also have been exposed to this idea of what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are. And what this concept says is as you move further up the pyramid, your foundation gets stronger for you to actually get to this place of self-actualization, okay? But here's the thing. If you have some insecurities at the bottom, like we understand right now in COVID, as a country, we have about 19 million people who don't have access to internet. We have about 30, 40, 50% of people who are experiencing food insecurity, some for the first time since this pandemic hit. So when our physiological safety, when our physiological needs and then our safety or that sense of belonging or love or being connected, trauma disrupts those things. So when the bottom of this pyramid is not solid, then we never get to the place where our children are reaching their full potential. Okay. All right. The question for tonight: how does trauma manifest itself in children and in teens? So what I did was I went and did some reading because I was just curious. I was curious about what did the literature say about what are the ways in which when we look at our kids, when we're with our children, what do we look for? Because if trauma is so individualized and if everybody has a different level of the way in which they respond to how things are impacting them, what am I looking for as a parent? What am I looking for as a caregiver? What am I looking for as an educator in my students and my children? So I went and I found a couple of things that kind of told me this is what you kind of want to hone in and narrow in on. So I just want to just kind of share these things tonight. So one of the ways that trauma, one of the things trauma interrupts and disrupts is attachment and relationships. Okay. Because it is through relationships that children learn to trust. Children who have relationships that are safe emotionally are children who will begin to trust. Children who have relationships that are not safe emotionally don't trust. So it's through our relationships that our children learn the world is safe. Um, I can express myself. I am accepted. I have people who care about me. I have people who love me. When those relationships are unstable or unpredictable, children learn that they cannot rely on others to help them. I love the statement some lessons are taught and some lessons are caught. Our children are learning lessons. And I tell people all the time in every single engagement, we know this as adults, but I think we forget this sometimes with our babies. Every time you engage with someone, they are learning a lesson. They learn if they matter. They learn if they're important. They learn if what they think and how they feel matters to you. In every engagement, you're learning something about the world. You learn if people listen. When I cry, does anybody respond? When I yell, does anybody respond? This is why when I go to the grocery store and I see kids fall out on their parents, I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, you're trying to communicate that you're frustrated. So you're frustrated. Now I'm frustrated. Now we got to sing, right? Traumatic because they couldn't get the bubble gum that's sitting next to the counter for them to come and buy it. Okay. But when we have relationships with our children and they're not stable or they're not predictable, then our kids get the lesson that they cannot rely on people to help them. Children who do not have healthy attachments, they end up having trouble controlling and expressing their emotions. That is so key because we send children into schools and we got to understand that there's some other stuff working in the backdrop. Now, parents, let me say this. I have gone through two daughters. They are now in college, and I got a freshman in high school. And I can tell you from experience that sometimes my girls just don't have the words to express the emotion. And I got to take a step back, or the words come out in a way that I don't appreciate, right? But I have to take a step back and I got to figure out, okay, what are you really trying to communicate with me? The other thing about attachment and relationships, our ability to develop healthy and supportive relationships depends on our having first developed those kinds of relationships with our families. So, parents, I am saying to us tonight that I want to encourage us to make sure that we are staying attuned to not only our relationships with our kids, but all of the relationships that our children are engaging. Do your children have a circle? Is there a group? Is there another trusted adult that they have in their life? Right? Okay. The other way trauma can show itself is by disassociation. I thought this one was really worth sharing. There's a lot of writing on this screen. Again, I'm not going to read all this, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there are some children who, when they've gone through certain types of traumatic experiences, they just separate themselves. So that's that child that sometimes will just come home and they just go and hide out in their room, or they go and hide out in the basement. Or for those of us that are in education, that student that sits in the back of the classroom, kind of pull a hoodie in and just kind of disconnect from the environment. Sometimes that behavior is communicating that they are dealing with something that they might not be able to put the words to, right? So children that automatically disassociate during stressful situations when they face trauma. Some people just the reaction is to disengage. And parents, let me say this because I thought about us when I was having another conversation. Listen to your children. Listen to your children. If our children are saying to us, I don't want to hug this person, I don't want to be around this person, or this person or this place makes me uncomfortable. Parents, I want to encourage us tonight to listen to our babies, because we have to teach our kids the personal boundary space. And they learn that it's okay by us giving them permission to say, okay, I don't want this in my space. Okay. Disassociation. This can also affect a child's ability to be fully present in activities of daily life. Now, I can tell you as a parent with teenagers, this one is a challenge for me because sometimes your teenagers just don't want to be bothered with you. They just want to hang out with their friends. They want to hang out with themselves. They want to hang out with their video games. But there are times where I make my kids hang out with me, or I go and I invade their space. Why? Because I need to check. I need to check in with you. I need to make sure everything is everything. I need to know hey, what's up with you? What's going on with you? So disassociation will make children feel like they can't be fully present in activities. The last thing I want to say about this is it is not always evident to others that a child is disassociating. So sometimes we see kids and we say they just spacing out, or they're not paying attention, or they're daydreaming. Sometimes that behavior is trying to communicate that something's going on with that child. Okay. Interruption in cognition, the way that they think and the way that they learn. Children that have experienced trauma, and especially what we call or refer to often as complex trauma, those children have problems. It's a brain thing, you all. It's the way the brain is operating, the way the brain is connecting. And parents, I emphasize this when I do these type of sessions, because sometimes I have to remind myself that the brain does not completely develop and close up until you're 25 years old. So they are young and they don't have what we call the executive functioning, that prefrontal cortex stuff, that stuff that we say as grown people, oh, it might not be a good idea for me to cuss out my boss. Even though I'm mad, it might not be a good idea for me to really say that. Children haven't quite developed that yet. And so as adults, if it's a child that has experienced a traumatic event, then the way that their brain is wired gets even more jumbled up, and they have a problem thinking clearly, reasoning, and problem solving. Okay, I see something in the live chat. Yes, Miss April Green, I agree. Dissociation can and is sometimes a protective factor. Absolutely. I need to escape. I need to get away. I need to disengage. Absolutely. I concur 100%. Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was a great point. How else does trauma manifest? Sometimes when children have experienced trauma and they've decided not to trust the world, it inhibits them from thinking futuristically. So they don't think to plan ahead. They don't anticipate the future. They're living for the moment. They're living in the now. When I was doing some work in Detroit at Cody High School, maybe about 10 years ago, they had this amazing program because in that particular part of the city, what they realized were young African-American men were anticipating living no longer than 25 years old. And it was like, what? Because they had no concept of what it was to be an old man and an old Black man, because they didn't see old Black men in their community, right? So they created a program called the Grandfather Program. And what they did was they asked them, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 15 years? Where do you see yourself in 20 years? Because children that are in traumatic environments where there's violence and gangs and drugs and a lot of social issues, their life expectancy is I'm living for the here and now. So children who experience trauma, they don't have the ability to plan ahead because they see no hope in a future. Concerning, but noteworthy. When children grow up in an environment where they constantly feel like they're under threat, they stay in survival mode. They stay in survival mode. Everything is just about making it from moment to moment. They cannot think beyond, how do I survive this moment? Our bodies and our minds, when they're under chronic stress, we have trouble thinking a problem through. We have trouble thinking a problem through in a calm manner. We find it difficult to learn new things because if your brain is in survival mode and stressed out, it's difficult for your brain then to be asked to process new data and new information. This is why sometimes our students are struggling in our classrooms because they're so stressed out with whatever the issue is. My boyfriend broke up with me. My friend don't like me. Um, different things that I heard, particularly in the high school. And I was like, girl, I need you to get over that. But then I had to stop and say, wait, in her life, this was a major event. So because her emotions or his emotions are all tangled up in this, they could care less about the new concept I was teaching in algebra about how to factor polynomials, right? Because the brain was resisting learning new information because it was so busy trying to deal with the emotional impact of what they were experiencing. So students struggle to sustain attention. Many children who have experienced complex trauma have learning difficulties that may require support in the academic environment. Now, here's the futuristic piece. Children learn their self-worth from the reactions and interactions of other people. I don't care what nobody tell you, parents, caregivers, I want you to know that we have the greatest influence and we are the greatest voice for our children. Keep talking to them. They hear you. I'm reminded of a commercial. It's a PSA commercial where you have two girls at the locker, and one of the girls starts talking, and her mother's voice comes out of her mouth when she's talking to her friend. And then she turns back and she says, "Where'd that come from?" And the PSA was, "Parents, don't stop talking. They're listening." Sometimes as parents, we need to be reminded, even though we think they're not listening, they are listening to us. They hear us. So keep talking. Shame, guilt, low self-esteem, and poor self-image all come from having experiences where our children learn the lesson that they are not valuable. Okay. And this is where I put my note on here for the current news. When children feel powerless to when children feel powerless in their world, when they feel like they don't make a difference, they don't have what it takes to even make a difference, that in and of itself is traumatic. That lack of efficacy, that lack of agency, that lack of you can make a difference and you matter, those things are traumatic to experience. Okay. When we have poor beliefs about ourselves, our agency, our self-efficacy, our ability to do things, it diminishes our sense of competency. So here's my example. As an alternative education math teacher, I had to recognize when my students came in my room, they had an attitude because they had never experienced success in math. And I had to learn very early with that demographic of students, don't take their resistance personally. Build up their competency, build up the fact that they can do this, and then do things to let them experience small successes. And then the more they experience small successes, they were willing to take the risk on trying new things. If you have a child that's afraid to try new things, I want to encourage you to build them up with small successes. And the more that they have small successes, the more they will be encouraged to try greater risk. Okay. Negative expectations interfere with positive problem solving. Trauma makes a child view themselves as powerless, and it adversely impacts their ability to plan and to be positive towards their future, because again, they think it's hopeless. Having learned to operate in survival mode, the child lives from moment to moment without pausing to think about, plan for, or even dream about a future. Parents, let me say this. Part of the challenge of having young people, particularly middle schoolers and high schoolers, is they feel like they are invincible. So they take great risk. And they take great risk on some of the things that we think is so foolish and things that we know could just tear up their lives forever, because that's a part of being a child. The difference in what I'm that and what we're talking about in survival mode is when your child says, I don't care about life, so I'm going to just be reckless. That's when I'm challenging us to think about and making the difference. Okay. All right. I don't see any questions or any comments in the chat, but as I'm going, because I'm rolling, y'all, I'm trying to get a lot of information in tonight, but please make sure that if there's something that's said or you have thoughts, please, I encourage you to share it with us. All right. This is where I want to rest my hat. Trauma and behavior. Children who have experienced trauma are easily triggered. My babies have taught me this term. Um, from you at 1,000 right now, or my students used to say, Miss Spidell, you doing too much, or Miss Spidell, you so extra, right? And so y'all, I almost got in my feelings one time because I thought they were being disrespectful. What you mean I'm extra? And then I had to learn what they were saying was, listen, lady, you coming at me with all this stuff. I need you to pump your brake. Ain't nobody excited about learning matrices, Miss Spidell, but you. And I was like, okay, let me slow down, let me calm down, and let me walk y'all through it. Because I was so excited to teach, but my students were not so excited to learn. So they would be triggered because they would be frustrated, right? Parents, I'm guilty of the same thing at home. I have an athlete right now. He just left me and he's doing track and he's on 2 soccer teams. So the other day I get up and I'm barking because he forgot to take out the trash. He looked at me like, Mom, are you kidding me right now? You do know from 8 to 3, I've been in school. From 3 to 10, I've been to track and I've gone to team 1 and team 2. And you tripping on taking out trash? Y'all, I had to fall back. I had to fall back because I was triggering him because his trauma was, I know this lady ain't yelling at me at 10 o'clock at night, as tired as I am about taking out garbage. That was a trigger for him, right? So again, parents, I share these stories to help us kind of stand down a little bit, because if you parent like me, I just zone in. I get up in the morning, when my kids, I scan my house. I'm seeing dishes in the sink. Somebody didn't vacuum. Somebody forgot to take out the trash. Somebody didn't clean the bathroom. What is wrong with you people? And then my kids are like, okay, you got us in all these activities. You got us, I got to do homework. We preparing for the SAT. We preparing for the PSAT. Lady, you want us to have good grades. I'm trying to still hang out with my friends because I got kids that are all in high school and they're social. What do you want from us? So parents, I share that to say sometimes we have to check our behavior so we don't trigger our kids and then cause that tension in the house. Okay. Sometimes our children, when they're frustrated and they're dealing with stuff, they struggle to self-regulate. Some of our kids just don't know how to zen out and calm down. And it's important, again, to mention the brain part of this so that we don't take it personal as parents, right? And to know that there's some chemical stuff happening in them and they're having a difficult time trying to pump their brakes, all right? But when you have a child that's dealt with a high level of trauma, um, their behavior is unpredictable and oppositional and volatile and sometimes real extreme. Okay. And a child who feels powerless, they may react defensively and aggressively in response to what they perceive as a blame or an attack. I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that because although our intentions may not be to harm our children, it does not mean that our impact is not harmful. I'm going to say that again. Although our intention is not to harm our children, it does not mean that our impact is not harmful. Okay. All right. Couple other things. Disassociation does affect behavior. Children who deal with trauma, they are often willing to take those high risk or participate in those high risk behaviors we talked about. And I listed a couple because, again, they're dealing with stuff and they're trying to figure it out. Miss April, I'm looking at your comment. The lack of self-regulation has come from us as parents. We sometimes overreact. Oh, Miss April, why are you picking on me? Um, we sometimes overreact to situations that does not seem called for. I agree 100%. For instance, the trash with your son. Yes, ma'am. However, your reaction could have been from your traumatic experience from childhood. I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I'm a translate. No, I know, Miss April. I know. I'm going to translate that because listen, you bring up a very valid point. I'm going to translate that, and I'm going to use that as an example. I think it's imperative for us as parents to acknowledge when we're working through our stuff. I think that's important. I think that's legitimate, and I think that fits in the space. I think it is very important that when our children trigger us, because there are times where our children can legitimately trigger us, that we have to figure out, is it what my child did, or is it that my child did something that's bringing up something in me? So thank you for that. Thank you for putting that in the space. Thank you for that. All right. Emotional responses. Children that deal with trauma, having learned that the world is a dangerous place, children are often vigilant and guarded in their interactions, right? And many children can sometimes learn to tune out, again, as a protective factor. And sometimes the difficulty that they have managing their emotions is so widespread that they don't even know how to put the words to it. I want to highlight one thing on this video because, man, time is moving. Children who have experienced early and intense traumatic events also have increased likelihood of being more fearful all the time and in many situations. Why? Because they don't know what's coming or what's happening. Okay. Here's and time just got away from me, y'all. I can't believe it's already 5:45. This is a part that I just want to I want to just introduce to parents, and I'm going to give, again, the school has this PowerPoint, so if you're interested in getting the data, the information, CPA does have this, and I would encourage them to share this with you, because sometimes when we talk about trauma, we don't talk about it from a physiological standpoint. I want to highlight that our environments have an impact on our bodies. So sometimes stress, we know, impacts our immune system. Stress impacts the brain development and the nervous system. And sometimes our children are having body dysregulation, meaning they are either overstimulated with sensory, what they see, what they hear, what they smell. They're overstimulated because sometimes we can trigger children and don't realize it. Okay. So our bodies, I have a book that I have to read right now. And it's called The Body Keeps Count, because I do this work in trauma. And it talks about how our bodies internalize experiences and it's being housed in our systems. Okay. I wanted to make mention of something called ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this study was so key because what it found was, now let me say this, I always put this disclaimer on the ACEs study. The ACEs study was done in California with college educated white middle class families. And those statistics found that at least 64% of participants had one ACE, one adverse childhood experience, and that 69% had at least 2 or more adverse childhood experiences. If you shift that demographic, that means that almost everyone we encounter has had some type of adverse childhood experience and has experienced some kind of trauma in their life, right? And so, having known that, the thing about the ACEs was it began to connect health issues with childhood trauma. Now, I gave us a lot of information tonight. Now, I want to talk about and reiterate some points, and then we're going to be done. Please, it is my hope that in the time that we've spent together, that you constantly remember that behavior is communication. What is the emotion our child is attempting to communicate? And anybody who's been on these calls with me, you know that I always try to leave us with some tools. I don't have time because it got away, but this is a hyperlink that I had in here for us to watch this video. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris is now the first Surgeon General in the state of California. And she does this work, phenomenal work. And this is like a 15-minute TED Talk. She does this amazing work on how in children trauma manifests itself. She was a pediatrician in Bayview, California. And she talked about how people were, her children, she had patients, young children who were coming to her and they had asthma issues, they had diabetes, they had heart issues as young people. And she said that she had never been trained to connect trauma to physiological responses and how the body of our children is responding to living in trauma. She shares the story in a video of how she had a young lady who kept having asthma attacks. And she was talking to her mom, and the mom finally said to her, you know, my daughter really has asthma attacks when she is when she hears my partner yelling at me. And so that was an aha moment for Dr. Burke-Harris. So again, this is another book that's on my shelf at home, The Deepest Well, where she goes into talking about how in the medical profession, because you have all these kids being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD and OCD, oppositional defiance disorder, all of these things. And she said, I'm trying to connect for the medical world. When we look at our children, we need to begin to understand that there's some other things that our children are experiencing that can explain what's happened to them medically. The somatic symptoms, the headaches, the stomach aches, the nausea, the asthma, all of these things, overeating and eating the wrong thing, and how your diet is impacting. So I would encourage you as parents that she is a phenomenal resource for you to put in your library. And if you guys can find this, it's a 15-minute TED Talk. I'm sad the time got away from us because I really wanted to share that TED Talk with you guys, but I encourage you to do that. And next month, I may open up with that just because I really want to make sure that we have a chance to see that. Miss Felicia Rhodes, I see you in the chat. If you can change anything about yourself, what would it be? 2 questions that I ask my children from time to time. Yes, Miss Sands, I will, I'm going to send that link. Let me see if I can get it out to us tonight. I sure will. If you could change anything about yourself, what would it be? And if there's something you can change about our relationship, what would it be? I like that, Miss Rhodes. You would be amazed what their answers are. I learn a lot about myself as well as my children. Trauma does find its way into conversation. Just wanted to share this. Miss Felicia, thank you for putting that in the space. I'll tell you, one of the things I often say when I look at my children is that children are our mirrors. If you want to know who you are, the good, the bad, the not so good, Look at your babies, because they show us who we are. I have a daughter right now, my second daughter. She called me today, as a matter of fact, and she just wanted to let me know, Mama, you may not want to acknowledge it, but I'm just like you. And I was like, yes, you are. Because she let somebody have it. And I called her and I was like, no, that's not how we handle that. She said, look, if you come for me or you come for my family, I'm coming for you. Well, y'all, I had to own the fact that she learned that lesson. She learned that lesson because that was a lesson her mama modeled in front of her. But she just hasn't learned the way to say it right yet. So y'all keep me in your thoughts. Keep me in your thoughts. But yes, our children, if we ask the questions, our babies will give us some answers. All right, health, Miss Felicia, that was a wonderful lead into this slide. Healthy ways to address our children's stress. Assure that your children feel safe, even in environments that may be challenging. Make sure that they feel safe. I'm doing some work right now around sexual assault. And one of the things that we tell parents whose children have been sexually violated, make sure that your children know in any traumatic experience, it is not their fault and that they are not responsible for what happened to them. Also, I want to make sure that we acknowledge that there's no correct timetable for healing. Let me see if I can change my right there. You all, I keep a picture of, I keep my dad's flag behind me. My mom's flower is in the corner. My dad's flag is behind me. So both of my parents have transitioned, and I will tell you from my own personal life experience, my own personal journey through life and through grief, that there is no set timetable for healing. That is imperative that I put that in the space. Tune in and learn your child's signals. Sometimes we got to have those hard conversations with our kids or uncomfortable conversations. That's important. Focus on managing your own stress. I believe Miss April led us into that thought. I have to learn how to calm down and woo, okay, take a breath and then address whatever my children are talking about. There are some other things that I share. Make sure your children are getting enough sleep. Practice how to be in the moment with your children. Help them eat well and exercise and try to stick to daily routines. I want to encourage us to have a curious mindset and not a critical mindset. Those of you that have been with me, you know that I advocate and I'm a proponent of this. Let's ask our children the questions versus making the statements. Okay. And finally, that is all. So our last time session is going to be May 12th. And when that evaluation comes out, I'm going to ask you if you would please make sure to put those suggestions. CPA does share those evaluations with me so that I can prepare for the questions that we'll have. Hopefully we'll be able to set something up where some more Q&A at the end. I always want to conclude with the fact that as parents, I want us to know that we do the best that we can with what we have and what we know at that time. And I want to thank you guys for sharing this afternoon with me. We are now back in the hands of CPA.
Ms. Lewis and Banner, before you guys close, I do have one announcement. Thank you, Ms. Spidell, for your phenomenal presentation. Yes, parents, I did get approval from my boss to get every parent who's attended one of these workshops a referred book by Ms. Spidell. I think, Ms. Spidell, if I got it right, I think it's the Love Languages for Children. Yes. And also the Love Languages for Teens.
As a matter of fact, it's these two books right here behind my head.
Yes.
Mr. Williams. Yes.
The 5 love languages for children and the 5 love languages for teens. So every parent who has attended the workshops, I got approval to buy you guys the book, so that we're actually in the process of ordering that book now. So we'll get that to you as soon as it comes in. I'll reach out to you. Just have to come and pick up your book at the school. But we want to thank you guys, for the parents, for coming tonight, to joining in, and we want to reward you with this book to continue our discussion and our learning about how to best help our students out. Thank you, Ms. Lewis, and Vanners, on you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Spidell, for that wonderful presentation. Every time you come, I always get a nugget to take with me into working with the students here. So we thank you so much, and we do look forward to seeing you again on the 12th. Parents, we thank you so much for attending tonight. I know it's hard taking time out of your busy schedules, but thank you so much for attending, and we hope you all have a great evening.